All right, welcome to a special July 4th YouTube video on my channel. You can see I am with the Lightning Round podcast. This is my favorite Chargers podcast. It has been since, like, you guys have been going on since 2013, right? Is that the year?
Yeah.
2014.
Mm-hmm.
Dang. So you were the second year of Mike McCoy. That's how long they have been doing it. And I know, like, I've been listening to these guys all throughout high school, all throughout, like, I've listened to every single podcast. That's how much I love them.
He's
so
aging us by the second.
no, that's only like 10 years ago.
only 10 years.
Hey, but listen, I know so much about football because of these three guys. So if I ever have a bad take, you have to go to the man who created this. Okay, so that's Garrett and Jamie and Craig. So let's just get that out of the way first. But on July 4th, what is the biggest thing about July 4th? What do we love about America, guys?
Independence, right?
Yeah.
Freedom, fireworks, alcohol.
Exactly.
All that good stuff.
So I thought today, since it's Independence Day, since we love America, we're going to exercise our freedom of speech. So let's do some hot takes. I got 2 hot takes ready for you guys, but if you guys have any hot takes that you want to start with,
why don't you kick it off, and then we'll get hotter and hotter as it goes.
Ooh.
I think that's how it goes.
I have a positive and a negative hot take.
Ooh,
so
okay.
There's, like, basically, to me, when I think of a hot take, I think of, like, there's a certain amount of variance to every single season in the NFL. And so there's like the highest potential of someone being as good as they possibly can be, and then someone just being, playing to their lowest of what they could possibly be. And so hot takes, to me, it's like all about variance. This is a possibility of what could happen. So there's a real scenario that I think the Chargers defense could finish top 3 in turnovers. And the reason for that is I'm a big believer in Jesse Minter. I like what he did at Michigan, and I like what that system really is, the Ravens system, Mike McDonald. We see guys like Anthony Weaver now, a lot of defensive coordinators, a lot of just one head coach now, I think, with Mike McDonald. That system, it's kind of taken over the NFL, sort of the way we saw like the Vic Fangio system several years ago. But with that, all those different blitzes, all those different formations, all the different looks that you can give a quarterback, and the things that you can run out of those looks, you can really confuse the quarterback. And also, you are trying to put the offensive lineman in conflict. So there are a lot of different things that Jesse Minter is going to be able to do with these edge rushers: Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, Tuli Tuipulotu. We added Bud Dupree, which is it's a good depth signing. And you got 4 guys at edge position. You're 4 deep. I think they could possibly be the best position group in the NFL, the best edge group in the NFL, because no team is really 4 deep. And then they have 2 stars on top of that. I think they're pretty stacked there. But also they got some feisty defensive backs. And that's kind of like the type that they've been going for. You look at the guys they drafted: Tarheeb Still, really feisty from Maryland. Cam Hart, not, a real feisty guy, but he's a toolsy guy. And then the guys in undrafted free agency: Thomas Harper, Robert Kennedy. Both of those guys, they're dogs, and they are going to be blitzing off of the edge. They're going to be helping putting those offensive linemen in conflict along with those edge rushers. So you have those guys that can force the quarterback to get rid of the ball before he wants to, as well as a guy like Derwin James. You have so many different tools that you can use on this defense. Plus, you have all of these different ways to put the offensive line and the quarterback in conflict. There's a real scenario where I think the Chargers could finish really, really high in turnovers, like top 3.
That's a pretty hot take to out the gate, and I don't know how we get so much hotter than that. Top 3 in turnovers is a lofty goal. It's a good take. I understand where you're coming from, but
it's a hot take.
top 3 though is, man, that's
really hot.
Yeah,
that's really hot. Like,
I'm trying to get hot.
Come to the screen. It's so hot.
Yeah.
Aiming high, man. I appreciate that.
Anybody got anything hotter than that? Because
show's over.
Yeah, we're done.
Thanks, I think I might have one. It sounds ridiculous, or maybe not so much. Who knows? I think Joey Bosa is going to play at least 16 games this year.
Well, now he's being a smart ass.
I mean,
is he going to walk on water and turn water into wine too?
Might feel like a little bit of a stretch. I would say that's a little hot. I would say it's hot. I am being a little bit of a smart ass, but still, by the same token, I mean, based on what we've seen here throughout his career, I would say that that's a win. If you get Joey for at least 16, he's been productive. Last year when he was on the field, he was super productive. So I'm just assuming that if he can stay healthy under this under the guidance of this new weight training program, I don't foresee a reason why he'll take a dip in play. The issue has just been that he hasn't been available as much as he needs to be. So if you can give me at least 16 games, I think I won't go as far as what Mike said with being top 3 in turnovers, but I do think he's going to have a tremendous impact on the amount of turnovers this team can create, because I think they're going to be very opportunistic on the defensive side of the ball. But it all comes down to how much health they have, specifically where those edge rushers are concerned. And if Joey can be in the mix of those 4 guys, I think the sky's the limit with regard to the amount of pressure they'll be able to put on the quarterback. But again, 16 games, we'll see. But I think that's kind of hot.
I mean, the rotation of 4 now deep, and are anybody hot enough to say that Chris Rumph is going to make this roster? Or
that was going to be one of my takes. Is I don't think he'll make the roster.
Chris Rumph?
I don't know
that he'll make it.
All right,
I don't think he'll make it.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not very hot.
I don't think that.
That's room temperature. But being able to have 4 guys and rotate, it would bode well for Joey Bosa, who probably will be able to take some snaps off now because they're deeper in that position. So I could see a world in which he plays, 16, 17 games.
I think you could see Bosa play inside more. Now
I
that
sure
they've
hope
added
so.
Rumph on the edge with Thule, you could see him lining up over guard more, getting more pressure in the interior, taking some of the pressure off the interior guys. That could be a way to hopefully keep him a little bit fresher and create some better matchups for Joey.
That's something that we actually saw a lot of Tuli Tuipulotu do last year when we had Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, and Tuli on the field. Tuli was typically the guy that was closer to the inside, closer to like the A gap, the B gap, while Joey Bosa was on the outside. I would like to see Joey Bosa on the inside more, though. I think that would be a really good look, having all 4 of those edge rushers on the field at the same time, but definitely getting Joey Bosa some rest throughout those games, getting Bud Dupree on the field more often. I think he could play a full 17-game season. That's a really hot take. But, just getting Joey Bosa, I think 10 games. 10 games from Joey Bosa having an elite edge rusher, it'd be very well, or it'd bode very well for this defense.
I think it definitely makes sense to have him reduced down inside to play over guard, just to use his quickness and technique to kind of create some of that instant pressure on the interior. All 4 guys on the field at the same time might be rough to do. That's a definite pass rushing situation. You're pretty much giving all your cards out at that point. But as far as like the bigger edge rushers, Joey definitely plays better with his hand in the ground as far as I'm concerned. I don't love Joey as a stand-up edge rusher, but I mean, most of the time they're playing nickel and he'll have his hand in dirt anyway on the outside, but on the interior, I think he could wreak havoc. So when we're talking about those obvious passing situations, having him kick down on the interior would be a nightmare for guards, because they're not going to be able to handle the quickness. And then, he can mix his power in. And like I said before, because he has that technique, and we know Joey is a tactician, he's going to make a nightmare again on the interior of that defensive line. And the Chargers are going to have to manufacture interior pressure some way, shape, or form, because they still don't have what I consider a pure interior disruptor right now. Even though, since we're talking hot takes, I do think Scott Matlock is going to make an appearance this year in a big way. I really liked what I saw. I think he was a guy that we got on late last year, guys, when we're looking at that selection that they made in last year's draft, and kind of looking over his tape and seeing that he was able to not always finish in the backfield, but he was definitely causing a stir, getting the quarterback off his spot, making him escape the pocket. And I think in this defensive scheme, under the tutelage of who he's learning under now and the collection of players on the defensive line, Matlock has an opportunity to really make some noise this year.
There was a stat that I saw, I think like 2 weeks ago on Twitter, where when Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, and Tuli Tuipulotu were all on the field at the same time, it was only like 34 or 44 reps and they got 10 sacks, and they all came on third down.
Yeah, they were really productive on the field together. Staley did a really good job. This will probably be the last time I say those words in the same sentence.
No, that's a hot take. We got hotter.
He did a good job of scheming those guys to the quarterback with stunts and twists. A lot of Bosa taking on extra blockers to get Tully to the quarterback. A lot of opportunities for those guys to work in tandem to get to the quarterback that were really effective. So it'll be interesting to see what the Chargers do with those guys when they're on the field together this year in terms of those stunts and twists. Because I don't think Minter blitzes quite as much as your traditional Ravens defense. He's a little bit more conservative in that regard, and he's relying more on 4, 5, and 6 man rushes fronts to get to the quarterback. So I don't think you'll see as many like just straight third down blitzes with, cover 1 or cover 0 on the back end. You're not going to see that as much out of him. I think you'll see more zone, more big fronts, trying to, like Mike said, put the offensive line in conflict and make them make choices.
So speaking of Matlock, it feels like there's kind of a cluster on the defensive line of Scott Matlock, Atito Obonia, and Justin Aboigbe, who are all kind of in the same tier-ish. Who do you think has the biggest year this coming season of those three? Boys.
I would have to say Scott Matlock, just based off what we've heard from Jim Harbaugh. He's highlighted him twice already. He's only highlighted him and Morgan Fox on the defensive line so far. And Scott Matlock is the starter right now. He's been lined up as the starter with, I think, Poona Ford on the interior.
Yep.
And so I would expect the most out of him because I did like his tape at Boise State. He played like 200-ish snaps last year. They didn't really come in any sort of big moments. It wasn't, it was kind of later on in the season when there wasn't much to play for. But I did like what I saw from him in the preseason, specifically in that Rams game. And I think that he could really hold up well against the run, and he has some pass rush upside as well. And that's one thing that Jesse Minter and it seems like Jim Harbaugh on this team is now really kind of trying to prioritize is getting interior pressure and getting interior defensive linemen that have the potential to get to the quarterback.
Yeah, I think Matlock is a little bit more of a natural pass rusher than Aboigbe and Tito are. I think Aboigbe, I knew I was going to mess up his name.
It's all right.
Aboigbe,
just call him Egg Boy.
I think Aboigbe, he's a high motor, high effort guy, more so than like a natural pass rusher. I think Matlock's a bit more of a natural pass rusher, and Tito is more, I don't want to call him a nose tackle, but he's more of like a space eater right now than he is, an edge rusher. So if I was going to pick somebody, I would probably also pick Matlock just because of what I saw in his college tape. You could play him at the 5 technique. You could play him at 3 technique. He played some 1 at times, although I don't think that's really the best use of his skills. But you can move him up and down the lineup and, again, create some matchups, put some linemen in conflict, and give him an opportunity to get to the quarterback, or at least, if he's not getting to the quarterback, disrupt the quarterback, which is something, like Craig said, they've been needing for a while from the interior.
Where Aboigbe's probably going to shine, and we saw this on tape, of course, from film study, is going to be he can absolutely be a menace in the run game. Just as far as jarring offensive linemen off of the line of scrimmage, driving them into the backfield again, even if he doesn't make the play, disrupting it to the point to where, one of his fellow defensive linemen or a linebacker can shake free and make a play for a loss in the backfield. So as far as a pass rusher is concerned, he's got a long way to grow there, but the team definitely saw something in him. I know that we heard, during the draft process, they saw him as well, like a second round guy. So they definitely see something there from a developmental standpoint that maybe he can grow into more of a pass rusher or a dual threat on the interior. But for right now, he's going to make his bones with stopping the run. So when you see them lined up against another team that likes to really pound the rock, similarly to the way that they will on offense, Aboigbe's probably going to get a lot more run, literally against the run, and you'll see him really, really shine there. But when we're talking just pure pass rushing chops, as Jamie mentioned, we definitely have a guy already there, and Matlock, who's looking to kind of make a step up this year, because there's nobody who right now looking at the roster has that role on lock. So he's got an opportunity to make a name for himself. And just again, based on everything we've seen, he looks like he has an opportunity to make a name for himself in that regard.
Yeah, I think Matlock's the answer. Maybe pretty warm, almost boiling take was that Aboigbe was going to outperform Tito this season. Maybe that feels like the natural progression, but you guys mentioned a bunch of it. Like, it feels like they drafted him high because they knew he had a part of this defense. Tito felt like a pet project under Telesco and always underperformed with all this high praise every single training camp. And then now there's no real ties to Tito as much as there is Aboigbe, who they're going to want to get on the field pretty soon this season, early on, especially with where they drafted him, where they felt he could be. So this feels like a good fit in Minter's system. While Tito, I feel like Jamie's talking about, just being more of a space eater, where he's going to be a rotational guy, but it just feels like Aboigbe is going to get a lot more run than Tito is, and then probably going to outperform him too.
You know, what I think they saw in him in terms of like the pass rush upside, he's got some pretty strong hands. And that's one thing that flashed to me on tape, is that at times he would be really pushing back the offensive lineman at the point of initial contact. That it was kind of surprising to me. He didn't do it consistently, but it definitely flashed on tape. That was one thing that I saw there, that maybe that's what they think that they see in that pass rush upside. I want to hear what you guys have to say about this DB room. How confident are you in the DBs right now?
Not at all.
Yeah, not at all. Let me roll into a little hot take as you're mentioning it. It feels like one of these rookies are going to be starting week one, whether it's Still or it's Cam Hart. There's just so much up in the air.
One of the DB rookies.
Yes.
Oh,
yes,
okay.
One of the corners. Yeah. So whether it's Tarheeb Still or Cam Hart, one of those two are starting week one. It just feels like Zont is going to be obviously, the first corner, but outside of that, it's like Christian Fulton, who's been a question mark since, forever. Is he going to be able to stay healthy? Is he going to return to form? Jasir Taylor has been way up and down. Deane Leonard's been mostly down. And then, you draft these guys who have, they're not obviously perfect because they're day 3 guys, but they've got enough that you could see that there's kind of a projection to be an NFL starter. Maybe it's a mid NFL starter to low, but it feels like when you've got those two guys, it feels like one of them is going to win one of those jobs, whether it's going to be inside or out, outside of Zont. And it just feels like they're going to want to get him on the field and see how it works, because they obviously felt there were some traits there. And I feel like there are too. But with all the question marks in the cornerback room, it feels like one of these rookies are primed to steal one of those starting spots.
Yeah, actually, this kind of goes nicely into one of my hot takes, which may not be all that hot now that I think about it. But I actually think the Chargers are probably going to have one of, if not the worst defensive back rooms in the league. They're going to be awful. But I think they knew that going in. And I think they leaned into a strength with the edge rushers, trying to cover that up. Because in my opinion, I've said this forever, you can cover up bad coverage if you're getting to the quarterback, but you can't cover up a bad pass rush. Really, you can't cover, you can't ask your secondary to cover wide receivers for 5, 6, 7 seconds and expect them to have success. But you can definitely hide questionable or bad coverage if you're consistently getting to the quarterback. And I think they recognize that. They were just going to be bare going in, and they'd try to find some traits guys in the draft and just load up on the pass rush to make it as easy on them as they can. So, and that kind of goes into Mike's take about the turnovers. I think the defensive line, specifically the edge rushers, is probably going to put the secondary into a position to create a lot of turnovers. I just don't think right now the secondary has the talent to create those turnovers. So I think you're going to see a lot of balls bouncing off of the corner's hands. You're going to see a lot of opportunities to force turnovers that maybe aren't converted just because they just don't have the personnel. And that's kind of my take on the secondary right now. Is they're just not very good, and they're going to need that edge rush group is going to have to be like on point to cover them up
and healthy.
Mm-hmm.
That too.
Yeah, it's the trifecta here. So I'm going to piggyback off of Jamie and Garrett, because the secondary has a multitude of problems. On one hand, they're either too small on the other hand, they have some size, but it's inexperienced. So there's not a collection together that makes sense on the field right now. So you've got Asante Samuel Jr., who would be my ideal CB2, as opposed to your starting number one corner, because smaller guy, definitely instinctual, can cover, can create turnovers, but he takes risks, and sometimes it bites him in the butt. When you're looking on the other side of the field, Christian Fulton, his biggest issue outside of just health is the dude doesn't tackle very well, and that's not going to fly in this defense. So that's an issue on the outside. I do believe that Tarheeb still is going to be the starting nickelback by midseason, though. Jasir Taylor may be the better athlete, but Michael, you used a term that I associate very closely with still. He's the feistier of the two, specifically in the run game. So I think that's where he's going to make his hay, is being an effective nickel where it comes to attacking the run. And they'll probably use him as a blitzer too. He's not a high-end athlete, but he's a high-effort guy and a short tackler. And they'll probably use him similarly to the way that they utilized, or what's our guy's name from Michigan that ended up with the Commanders? Smaller.
No.
Michigan.
Saren still?
Mikey Sarenstill.
Sarenstill.
He reminds me of Sarenstill with regard to the way that he plays. Sarenstill is the better athlete, but still tackles similarly to Sarenstill, and he's a little bit bigger than Mikey is also. So I see them utilizing him in a similar fashion. And again, where Taylor is the faster, more agile guy, I do believe that Still will beat him out being a better all-around nickel cornerback. But as far as the corners are concerned, and we're talking about the secondary as a whole, the safety position, that's a whole nother story outside of Derwin James, although he had a career year last year. We'll see how that ends up working if it carries over into this year. Hell, they had to sign ancient Tony Jefferson to the roster. Who knows what's going to happen with that going into the season? Who knows what he has left in the tank? But at least he'll be knowledgeable in defense. So hopefully, just by his understanding, there'll be a lot fewer busted plays on the back end, and maybe that frees Derwin up to play more in the box. Maybe a little bit of star here and there, just depending on the matchup from week to week. But right now, the entire secondary is pretty much in flux, and the only position I trust is wherever Derwin James is playing.
Yeah, you brought up something interesting with Jasir Taylor. The guys that they have brought in, they're all feisty. And Tarheeb Still versus Jasir Taylor, that's kind of like the battle that we're all looking at for that starting nickel spot right now. This is kind of a hot take. Well, let me first just say this. Tarheeb Still, he's got the size advantage on Jasir Taylor. And one thing Jesse Minter said is that with these cornerbacks, they're not just going to have guys only play in the slot or only play on the outside. They want all of these guys to be able to play both of those positions. Would you feel more comfortable with Jasir Taylor on the outside or Tarheeb Still on the outside? I mean, that's a very easy answer. It's Tarheeb Still. And so I think that would probably edge him out to probably be the day one starter. That's kind of a hot take. But my other hot take is there's a very real scenario that Jasir Taylor gets beat out by one of those undrafted free agents, because I really think one of those guys could just break out in training camp or the preseason. Once the pads get on, it's all questions that you had are going to be answered. Mm-hmm. And if Jasir Taylor is not as, if there's just like one thing in his game that one of these undrafted free agents can do better, that may be enough, because it's just a previous regime's guy. This DB room last year, it was like the worst in the league. I'm not high on the DB room either. Alohi Gilman, he had a great year. He came in clutch a lot of the time in 2022 and 2023. He had two back-to-back very good years. But like I said in the beginning, there's like this variance. And Alohi Gilman, he was on the high end of his variance there of playing two very good years. What's the likelihood of getting three? And then Derwin James, he was on the low end of that variance last year. I'm more comfortable in him reaching that high end. So, yeah, there's a lot of questions in this DB room. My hot take here right now is, could Jasir Taylor even just not make the roster and get beat out by one of those other guys?
Ooh, who do you like? Thomas Harper?
I like Thomas Harper.
Okay,
I like Robert Kennedy too. He's got a lot of ball skills, but he's really small. And Jasir Taylor is also small. So is Thomas Harper. But I think Robert Kennedy's like 5'8". But that NC State defense, like you talk about creating turnovers, he was a very big part in creating turnovers, and that NC State defense did a lot of that.
So I just finished watching UDFAs, and I guess this could roll into a hot take too, because that's interesting. Just hear Taylor not making the roster. That's interesting. That's a good one. I think, as a hot take, I think the interior offensive lineman Carson Barnhart makes the 53. He's a Michigan guy. They paid him a bunch of money to, a bunch in terms of, UDFAs, to sign with the Chargers. He's both was a good play guard and tackle. It just feels like this is the year that, they don't have Will Clapp, and it just feels like Foster Sorrell has run its course. It feels like it's going to be 9 guys again, where it's Rashawn Slater, Zion Johnson, Bradley Bozeman, Trey Pipkins, Joe Alt, Jamari Salyer, Brendan Hymus, Jordan McFadden, and then the 9th being Barnhart. It feels like, because he's got the flexibility of playing tackle and guard, it'd be a nice little fit with Pipkins also being a guy that can play inside and out. Salyer playing inside and out. They've got a lot of flexibility there. And with a guy like Barnhart, it just feels like they wanted him here. He's a Michigan guy, and he's going to make this roster. So that's my hot take. I think Carson Barnhart is the name to watch in training camp, and I think he ends up making the roster.
I think Taylor and Deane Leonard should be looking over their shoulder.
Oh,
I agree.
for sure.
I could see a world where both of them wind up not making the roster. Taylor was a guy, they were both projects for Staley, neither one of which has worked out very well.
Yeah.
Taylor has had some better moments, but overall he's been mostly down, and he was pretty damn bad last year. And Leonard just seems lost out there more often than not. So I could definitely see a world where both those guys don't make the roster. I'm kind of watching Jordan McFadden. Jordan McFadden, excuse me. I'm kind of watching Jordan McFadden. I feel like Bozeman is kind of a placeholder right now. I know there have been times during the offseason where Harbaugh has talked about McFadden, talked him up and highlighted him a little bit. So he's a guy who I could see, if things don't work out on the interior, I could see him grabbing a spot on the offensive line at some point after midseason, depending on how the season's going. I could see him potentially taking over for Bozeman. I could also see, if Pipkins isn't working out at guard, him sliding in at right guard. He looked really good. I believe was it at center or left guard late last year when they had him playing
left guard
the last few games.
Yeah. Yep.
He looked really good. Strong, mean, athletic, knew where he was supposed to be. He could get to his spots. So McFadden's a guy that I'd be watching closely to see if maybe he can work his way up the depth chart and grab a spot on the line sometime in the second half of the season.
All right, here's a question. Can this coaching staff turn JT Woods into a viable safety option?
No. Nope.
Jamie didn't even let you
we said we have all the faith in the world in this coaching staff until proved otherwise. So are we just saying that this is a miracle that not even the Jesus of defensive coordinators can work?
The thing is, for me, is JT has had 2 big concerns, and it's on the field and not being able to stay on the field. So
do we even know exactly what happened with him last year? Was that ever?
I don't know what the injury was.
He had some kind of a health issue, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was an injury.
It was all very vague. We never got concrete.
We
never got concrete answers to that.
I think he had one good preseason game, and I think that was also against the Rams. But even in that game, he was missing tackles. He's just a guy who's always playing so fast, and it's either really good or it's to his detriment, and it's just too often to his detriment.
You see, I don't even think you can say he's playing fast. I think the game is too fast for him, and he's not comfortable tackling.
You know what? So I've watched it over and over again, like countless times, to the point to where it makes me sick to my stomach. But I see what the issue is with him. You're right, Jamie. I think he's a track guy, not a football guy. One of the reasons why it appears that way from him is you look at him as a sprinter, and he's fast in a straight line, but his change of direction is terrible. And it's almost like his body won't slow down fast enough to work. So even if he processes properly, he can't maneuver in and out of cuts to attack or deal with guys when we're talking about changing direction to tackle. I see high effort when he's coming downhill. Dude looks like a bullet. When he sees it and he really wants to go after it, the effort isn't lacking. It's just he can't break down. If a running back kind of gets him, if he squares up a running back and they're in the open field or returner, wherever you see him playing, and a back has any level of swivel to him whatsoever, then Woods is pretty much cooked because he can't sink his hips and he can't attack in any direction other than north. And it's really annoying. It makes him really good on special teams because technically that's what you're doing. You're flying downfield like a bat out of hell. And typically you have the advantage because you're at full speed more often than not before a guy either sees you or has an opportunity to react. So I think he could be a special teams demon. But as far as a free safety and having to tackle people in the open field one-on-one, complete liability. So I don't think it's necessarily a technique thing. I just don't think he has the agility and athletic overall ability to be a free safety. So I don't really know what you do with him.
Once again, Craig, get out of my head. I was just going to say, I feel like he could be a really good special teams player, and that's probably his ceiling at this point, at least for this year. You have the ability to run quickly in a straight line, be explosive in a straight line. So maybe he can come up with a pick here or there in certain defensive looks, just playing center field and covering ground, assuming he can read the ball, read the quarterback quickly enough. But yeah, being able to come downhill and hopefully make a tackle on special teams right now feels like his absolute ceiling. I mean, last year was a lost season. He wasn't on the field outside of the preseason, and he's got a lot of making up to do with a coaching staff that demands a lot in terms of tackling and physicality out of their defensive backs. And I don't see how he holds up with that.
I wish we get a straight answer on what's going on with him because he was just always out. It was always illness, nothing specific. Then they activated him, and then I think it was against the Ravens. He was sick again. They activated him, and then they took him off against the Ravens. I don't know, man. Yeah,
It's a great mystery.
But are you guys a little bit afraid? And we'll take over as a lightning round podcast since Michael had to step out for a second. But are you guys afraid with the new kickoff rules that now he's going to have to probably tackle in space a little bit more than before? Because now it's run in a straight line, hit somebody, and they've only got a couple seconds. But now they've got a little bit more room to run. There's going to be a little bit more hang time. It's not going to be, it's not going to be as quick as. Catch him when he catches the football. He's going to catch it and probably make a move or two before you can get to him.
So that pretty much limits him to what, a gunner on punt?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I don't think you're going to be able to keep a guy around when he's only available to you in one phase of the game. But yeah, very good point, Garrett. I wasn't even thinking about the new kickoff rules. Yeah, so it's why there's a premium on these shiftier return guys now, and that's his kryptonite. So, I mean, where are you going to place him? Remember, they count guys off from the inside out on kickoff. Yeah. So I guess, he definitely couldn't be on the outside. If you want him screaming down the middle of the field as like a 1 or a 2, maybe, but I don't know. That's a very good point you brought up, though. So his prospects of making this roster just became that much slimmer.
Well, that's where you want a guy like Tarheeb Still, who wants to get his, nose in there and get a little bit dirty. Whereas JT Woods, he may be the first one down there, but I don't know if he's going to be making a tackle or not.
You're going to pull a Forrest Gump and run through the tunnel.
Run straight through and go in the tunnel. Oh, funny.
So have you guys watched any of those undrafted free agent cornerbacks?
I watched Thomas Harper. I haven't watched Robert Kennedy yet, though.
Okay. Do you think Thomas Harper could play better at safety than JT Woods?
Ooh. Boy, that's a low bar there, Michael. I would say right off the bat, they'd be pretty even with the transition.
So
I like him. I like Thomas Harper. He's got some traits.
Yeah. And that's kind of the only thing that JT Woods has that's his promise, right? Is that the size and athleticism is there for him. But at safety, it's a position you're already not deep at. I just don't think that you can have a guy on the roster that you just can't really rely on. And you might as well just give one of those undrafted free agents a shot. Like Thomas Harper, reason why I brought his name up is because he went to Notre Dame, and the Chargers safeties coach was from Notre Dame, Chris O'Leary. And they actually listed Thomas Harper as a safety on the Chargers website when he didn't play really any safety last year at Notre Dame. He was mostly in the slot.
Yeah,
And
he was
so,
a nickel, but he did some fill-in with an injury, I think, late last year.
oh, so he did play some safety later
Yeah,
on?
but just in like some pitching duty, not like he wasn't the starter.
Okay. That's interesting.
He's more of
an
an in the box safety, though, right? Is Harper more of an in the box safety? He'd be more of a strong safety than a free?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Because then it makes me think a little bit about, like, we can't forget Akeem Dent is there. I'm curious to see how he holds up in camp. I think Dent has an opportunity to make the squad and contribute just because he's not the flashiest of free safeties, but I mean, for lack of a better term, he's the safest of the safeties. Like, as far as being a more sure tackler, coverage, I'm fine with him as a split safety. I wouldn't want him being a single high guy, but I do see him, not being afraid to come downhill and stick his nose into the run game and being able to cover underneath. Over the top, he's not as natural playing deep halves of the field. I mean, he can do it, but I like the way that he pursues underneath and breaks things up in like kind of the intermediate portions of the field. But I mean, I like Harper. I just think he's more of a strong safety, and I think you kind of have that covered. I mean, outside of you got Derwin, and then I mean, what is Tony Jefferson? Is Jefferson a strong or free safety?
At this point,
I think it's a little bit. So again, Michael, you
linebacker.
mentioned it. Yeah, you mentioned it. They're training these guys. They're cross training these guys to play every position for the most part. But
yeah,
from just the perspective of their base position, I think Dent probably needs to get a closer look here in the offseason during camp. I think he has a really good chance at being one of those guys that makes the 53 at the end of the day.
Yeah, he's definitely one of those guys to keep an eye on. There was an interesting stat that I saw on PFF that he played. So in terms of like the amount of snaps that he had throughout his 5 years at Florida State and the amount of times he was targeted he had the least ratio of that. You understand what I'm saying? Like he was targeted the least amount. He had the lowest target percentage, I guess. It was like really absurdly low, and no one was really close from last year. And so I thought that was interesting. He's just really not targeted a lot. And, that's like a good thing. It's like if you're not noticed on the offensive line, you're probably playing pretty well.
Yeah, and it's just kind of like I mentioned from what I remember watching of him, he's pretty good at the underneath stuff. The deep stuff, yeah, kind of iffy, but definitely good cover guy underneath. So when you're talking about defending against tight ends, slot guys running those, some guys doing drags, passing guys off, but being in the proper position to not get beat backside, following the drag too far, or covering curl routes, breaking on those once he kind of identifies what the route's going to be. Even if it's not breaking the pass up, meeting the receiver at the same time the ball gets there and stopping the play right where he catches it, as opposed to it breaking off, after the reception for an additional chunk yardage. So Dent is someone that I'm not going to say I'm high on, but I do believe, again, has a chance specifically in this scheme to be someone who can contribute.
I wouldn't lose sight of AJ Finley. I liked him last year. I think he's a guy who can play the deep middle. He can play split safety. You can bring him down in the box. He can tackle a little bit. He has decent ball skills. He's a guy who I feel like if you're looking for a safety who can play multiple positions and fill in as safety 4 or 5 behind some of the veterans, I feel like he's a good option because I think he can play both safety positions. You maybe could play him at dime linebacker, play him down in the box, and find ways to make him be productive. So he's a guy that I keep my eye on. Didn't get much run last year, but he's still around. They have a lot of depth issues at safety. So I think he could have a good camp and surprise some people and make the team.
I love that you brought that up because I noticed him like a month ago. He had I think 2 good days in OTAs where he had an interception. But then I went back and I watched him. He blocked a punt against the Bills. I didn't even remember that, but he played well on special teams last year, and he made the team because of that special teams ability from Ole Miss last year as an undrafted free agent. No one really expected him to make the roster, I think this is a guy who's like sneakily building up some momentum. And I love that you brought that up because that's another guy that you have back there that like it makes it kind of tough to reasonably keep a guy like JT Woods.
Yeah, I think he's going to have a hard time, Woods, making the roster. I just think they're going to find somebody that offers some value on special teams, who can tackle, who maybe makes a couple splash plays either in the preseason or in camp. And JT Woods is still JT Woods.
Sorry, maybe I'm wrong on this, but wasn't AJ Finley the dude who knocked the ball away in that Bills game? Like he forced that fumble on Deontay Hardy or something, I thought.
Was that the punt return?
That's what I thought. Maybe. Anyway, I remember there was a special team. I don't remember him blocking a punt. That's crazy.
Oh, no. Yeah. No, it was a fumble. Yeah. That's what I meant to say. It wasn't a block punt.
Right. Yeah. No, he did.
It was the gunner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all liked him. He was one of our top UDFAs last year.
Yep.
And he was we said it. He was a year or two away before he'd really start making some noise on defense. And I think this might be that uphill climb for him, where he starts to ascend a little bit.
That's a good positive note, I think, to end it on.